Hi friends, it's your pal Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Brennan Lee Mulligan's Critical Role campaign for Araman, the new changes to the Dungeons and Dragons rules that they are using for Araman, desperate measures. So he gave out this handout, and the way he did this, the way he communicated the changes was excellent. He gave out one piece of paper, and that piece of paper was like, this is called desperate measures. This is what these rules changes, you can refer to these rule changes as desperate measures. This is excellent. And if you're going to change rules in Dungeons and Dragons for your campaign, and I highly encourage you to do it, you should be changing rules for Dungeons and Dragons. That's what Gary intended. That is good, right? You should do it like this. Give it at the beginning of a session or the end, either one, just not in the middle of the session. And give it out on a piece of paper so everybody can look at it and allow conversation. Okay, so yeah, so he did all that right. What's really interesting is, why did he do desperate measures? Okay, now desperate measures it's some changes that specifically deal with what happens when you hit death saves. So why did he do this? So in my humble opinion, he did this for one reason. He is attempting to further hide the growing obvious thing that this group is doing, which is when on both the dungeon master side, and there's no problem with that, they're fudging. They're not fudging. They are not honoring the rolls that are happening on the dice. They're rolling the dice. They're not allowing the audience to see the number. They're reporting it. And what I'm saying is that anytime that die roll says something that is going to take the story into a direction they don't want, they're ignoring that roll. Anytime it's for something that doesn't matter, they're going to let the roll stand, right? But anytime the dice take the story in a direction that they don't want, whether it's the dungeon master or the players, they are not reporting the actual die roll. That's what I believe, okay? Now, the reason why I believe that, there's only one reason. There's one reason. They are economically incented to camera every single one of those die rolls. They are losing, I would say they're losing they're losing between $250,000 and $25 million per season. That is a huge economic incentive to do this. And the only reason they're not doing it, it's not technical. We already know that, because they've actually done, super high resolution cameras on minis that move around the board, right? So it's not a technical problem, right? It is a choice they are making, and they're sacrificing $250,000 to $25 million a season. They may have already sacrificed 0.1 to 0.25 billion dollars to do this, right? And they're highly incented, because these stories are turning up in comic books, in novels, in video games, in board games, and are going before Jeff Bezos, right? These are screenplays that Jeff Bezos is reading. Let's not pretend, right? It's ridiculous. There's real stakes on the ground here, right? So here's what's interesting. None of this was needed, right? Desperate measures was not needed. And here's why. The part I think that Brennan Lee Mulligan doesn't understand, because he's not as good of a dungeon master as I am, is the following. And that is, you don't have to honor the die rolls on the dungeon master side or on the player side. You don't have to, right? And you're like, wait a second, Scott. If you're not honoring the die rolls, you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's not correct. Now, that is the reason why Brennan Lee Mulligan didn't do this. Well, what would he do? All right. So to fix this problem, what he should have done is not done desperate measures. He should have said our values, right? And said, here's a news piece of paper. We're changing the rules of this campaign. From now on, anytime there's a die roll that we don't like, we're going to say squeak. We're going to say squonk and then the number. Okay. Every time we say squonk and the number, we're telling the dungeon master and we're telling the audience that we don't like the die roll and that we're choosing a different value that wasn't rolled, right? And we're going to report a value that was not rolled on the dice, right? And you're like, well, fudging is allowed for dungeon masters, and fudging is allowed for dungeon masters. That's not debatable. Gary talked about fudging all the time, right? But here's the thing. This is the part that, I'm against fudging always. I don't think dungeon masters should ever fudge ever, right? Well, wait a second. Aren't you saying that? Aren't you going against Gary? Yes, I am. Like you can fudge, right? You're still playing as a dungeon master. You can fudge. You're still playing Dungeons and Dragons, okay? But you're playing bad Dungeons and Dragons. It is bad. It is a bad game, right? Like, if you fudge, you suck as a dungeon master, and you should stop fudging so you can be a good dungeon master. Because as long as you fudge, you will always suck, right? You're like, wait a second, Gary said that. Yeah, Gary did. He was at the beginning. He built it, right? Like, if you build a house, right, and you build that house in 1974, guess what? There's going to be some better methods in 2024, 50 years later, right? Like, you're not going to use the same crappy, equipment and processes you used, 50 years ago. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So Gary was great. We are thankful, but not everything he said was perfect. He was human, right? He wasn't some god, right? He wasn't perfect, right? And so, okay, so get this. Here's the part. The reason Brennan Lee Mulligan doesn't want to do this, he doesn't want to give a piece of paper that changes the rule and says our values and say we're going to openly change the die value for players. Players will report a value they did not roll whenever they want a different outcome, right? Because he knows what's going to happen. The second that happens, every grognard's going to stand up and go play and say, you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. That will happen. Here's the issue. You are playing Dungeons and Dragons. Well, wait a second, Scott. If we're just ignoring the die values every time that we roll something we don't want, how are we playing Dungeons and Dragons? Are we just writing a novel? No, you're not. One, there are a lot of rolls where you won't know what you want, right? And then the dice are going to take you in a different direction. And that is interesting, and that is different. And that is an aspect of what Gary brought in. The other issue is, what is Dungeons and Dragons? Well, I'll tell you right now. My take, if you have the books at the table and you are using some of the rules, but not all the rules, you should be at a physical table. This is definitely Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not saying that anything that doesn't have this isn't Dungeons and Dragons, but this is definitely Dungeons and Dragons. If you have the 2024 core rule books, PHB, DMG, MM at the table, you have physical dice, and you have one DM and one player, and one player is using one species or one class from that book, you're playing D&D. You could change literally every other thing. That's it. Like, you could literally change every other aspect of it. You're still playing D&D, right? And I think Brennan is legitimately afraid to push against the grognards. He doesn't want people saying, well, that's not D&D. People will say that, but they're wrong, right? You are, to me, I call it anchoring, right? The books anchor you, and the dice anchor you. And one species or one class anchors you. That's all that's needed, right? And you could change every other aspect. Gary encouraged us to change the rules. So Brennan Lee Mulligan did not have to do desperate measures. He could have done our values. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.